Good morning, it's Rebecca Custer from the Australian Space Agency, and I'd like to welcome you all today to this Communications, Technologies and Services Roadmap webinar. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, so those in Adelaide are on the Kaurna land, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. So, welcome to the Australian Space Agency's launch of the first of a series of 7 technical roadmaps. Today we're going to be going through the recently published Communications, Technologies and Services Roadmap. Do note that the presentation component of today's session will be recorded and distributed on various digital agency platforms. So the presentation will be approximately 30 minutes. We're going to be opened shortly by Aude Vignals, who is the Chief Technology Officer of the Australian Space Agency. We'll then welcome Catherine Bennell and Mick Hose from the team for an overview of the roadmap before Arvind Ramana outlines the next steps for implementation. Finally, we'll finish today with questions from the audience. So do note that you can submit them by accessing slido.com. The event code is Tech Roadmap. So if we go to the next slide, there are some instructions there for you. Feel free to put your questions in and note that you can also upvote other people's questions. So without any further ado, I will welcome Aude Vignals to the virtual stage.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and welcome everybody. I would like to start this session by a quote from the new head of the Space Agency, Enrico Palermo, insisting on the second part of that quote. A priority for the agency over the next 12 months will be releasing roadmaps which will guide the way. So here we are today to introduce the first roadmap, and looking at the number of downloads through our website, I think we reached 500 downloads, and the number of registration to this session, more than 400. We are really looking forward to explain this roadmap and take as many questions as possible. Next slide, please. Just a bit of context. You recall in April 2019, we have released our civil space strategy. We highlighted 7 areas of priority where Australia has an opportunity to grow a national space capability. We are in the second phase of that strategy. We are releasing roadmaps. Comms is the first one done, 6 to go, and we are on track to deliver all of those before the end of this year. So let's get into it, and over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Aude. The purpose of the roadmaps is to foster an aligned, connected and informed Australian space sector that's united behind a shared vision for each civil space priority area and a clear pathway to meeting our ambitions. Now, flowing from the Advancing Space Australian Civil Space Strategy, we're focusing on areas where we can build a sustainable industry based on competitive advantage. The roadmaps will be used as the basis of the agency's strategic implementation moving forward. So we've given them lots of thought and attention, and they're really a focus of our activity in the CTO group. So according to flowing from the strategy, we came up with a list of criteria that a capability must satisfy to be included on a roadmap. They are strive towards bold visions and ambitions that align with the strategy and have the potential to synergize with other selected capabilities to uplift the sector in an enduring manner, and be based on a comparative or competitive advantage, and or be an area of national strategic interest, or be a necessary input to realize another included capability, even if that input itself isn't a competitive advantage. Now, we do recognise, of course, that over the course of a whole decade, new national needs, new opportunities, new disruptive technologies may emerge. Therefore, we'll revisit the roadmaps periodically and adjust them according to these criteria, which will remain constant. And different combinations of these criteria call for differing levels of government and private sector facilitation. The roadmaps are developed in collaboration with the whole space sector, and it is the initiative of the entire space sector together that will drive the pursuit and capture of the identified opportunities. So if we move to the next slide now, you'll see here a diagram that we called the roadmap's nexus. because each roadmap doesn't exist in isolation. You can see them in the middle there. They're all interconnected. They're relying on cross-cutting technology areas that critically underpin the competitive advantages. They're facilitated by non-technical enabling capabilities, which we call facilitators, which are the ecosystem builders and what enables progress towards reaching the targeted capabilities. And they may be applied to many cross-cutting services where we think that there's the greatest opportunity for our space sector moving forward. So we're really pleased today to showcase to you our first roadmap in the series, Communications, Technologies and Services. So over to Mick to take you through that, who led the development of this roadmap, supported by Rebecca.
Thanks very much, Catherine. I'm Mick Hose. I'm just going to take you through the first of the 7 roadmaps that Catherine just mentioned. And for that first roadmap, we very much adopted a 4-phase evidence-based approach. Now, with the comms roadmap being first, I'm going to take you through those phases, but also what lessons that we've learned during their development, which have been subsequently implemented in those 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th and 7th roadmaps that are under development over the course of this calendar year. So on the screen, I've got those 4 phases, and I'll just take you through it broadly phase by phase. During the first phase, we come to understand what the opportunities are in Australia, but also internationally via a state-of-the-art analysis, where we looked at a range of current and emerging technologies that are out there. During phase 2, we leapt forward a decade, and what we wanted to do then was determine the targets based on vision and ambition statements per technology. But what we wanted to also do was quantify what the enablers were for all of those, so we could achieve the actual targets. So with the concept of where we are today, where we want to be tomorrow as targets, during phase 3 of pathways, we derived logical steps that we could take as a nation per technology. And in parallel to that, we're starting to look at the drivers behind each technology, such as the market demand and also facilitators that need to be considered as well. So leading up to phase 4, we engage across multiple departments. We also had significant input from 10 universities to define the evidence base that we had before we went out to the states and territories and then to industry. With industry, we saw input from approximately 20 companies represented through a range of industry associations, and that was fantastic. So now, during phase 4, we are implementing this roadmap. And this roadmap is being implemented as our peer roadmaps are being matured over the course of this calendar year. And in about 30 minutes, I'm going to ask Arvin to shed more light on what the next steps may be for those roadmaps. So it shouldn't be a surprise that our dependency on information as a nation is exemplified by the approximately 50% growth per year in households using fixed line communications from 2009 to 2016. But when we step away from those houses and we step away from the fixed lines, we are seeing similar dependencies of being connected to access a range of different forms of information. And then here's just a few examples, and I really am scratching the surface. When you consider autonomous mining operations in the outback, remote working and education, connecting our communities socially, but also for entertainment, and in the event of natural disasters, coordinating the planning leading up to them and also the responses. And also, similarly with defence, defence uses satellite communications for the command and control of deployed sea, land and air forces regionally and also abroad. So such a demand for information presents a significant opportunity for Australia. It's broadly been quantified at $1.6 billion annually in Australia's satellite communications market. One theme that we observed from our state-of-the-art analysis is that how competitive, in order to be competitive for communications technologies globally, as described by Catherine, if we succeed commercially and in a sustainable manner, we may be able to focus on subsequent communication technologies where we have both competitive strength and there is also a market demand. We have to have those two things, strength and the demand. And on the right-hand side of the slide in the white font there, beyond enabling connectivity, increased competitiveness competitiveness within satellite communications. It also enables us to connect socially and economically, but also there's those the spin-offs, the contribution to the STEM-centric workforce, and also contributing to information assurance. So beyond our geographical advantage, Australia, we've got so much to offer in satellite communications and that growing market. Our vision is to mature from hosting communications infrastructure to also providing solutions for that increasing demand on radio frequency forms of communication by incorporating optical communication and also moving towards quantum technologies enabled by our own network management tools. Now, low Earth orbit, that's initially going to assist us getting into global markets while contributing to a more connected Australia. And that's just one of the 6 focus segments that we'll delve into in a moment. But while we're focusing on that segment in low Earth orbit, we very much see in a decade that those technologies have extensibility out to medium Earth orbit and also other non-geostationary orbits as well. In terms of an ambition, it really is based on emerging as a trusted international partner for 6 satellite communications technologies that I'll amplify on the following slide. Our observations and our analysis indicates that we really can play a lead role in emerging technologies such as lasers for data communications, quantum technologies for higher forms of assured and secure communications, and also hybrid radio and optical communications. Now, these 6 focus segments that are on your screen right now, they've been identified as the priorities for communications, technologies and services capability development, but by no means is it exhaustive. These have been considered to be the greatest areas of opportunity for the Australian space sector because there is both that pedigree in these technologies, but also a market demand over the course of the next decade. I'll take you through this section of the roadmap in about 8 slides time, but in the bottom quarter of the roadmap, and it's about slides 16 and 17 of the roadmap itself, we describe 5 facilitators, and these really are essential to achieving those targets. There's the investment and policy, and some of the early activities that we've seen include the $150 million supporting the Moon to Mars initiative. There's the defence investment of $50 million in satellite communications innovation in cooperation with the Australian Space Agency as well. For governance and coordination, we're communicating those strategic directions and co-designing clear pathways. There's also supporting the existing treaties that we have, strengthening collaboration, not just domestically on this island, but also internationally as well, to enhance our position on the global space scene. In terms of workforce skills and resilience, the biggest theme that I'd like to highlight is fostering the transfer of knowledge from overseas and other industries into Australia from left to right, but also from the bottom up through STEM. And in terms of facilitating through regulation and standards, we need to ensure ongoing review and implementation of industry standards and practices to keep pace with those changing technologies. And that is not an easy task. In terms of social license and sustainability, it's promoting those behavioural norms through fostering collaborative behaviours, and also that theme of STEM education is coming through there as well. Now, I appreciate this is quite hard to see on your screen, so I hope you have access to a printout or a zoom in of page 14 of page 16 and 17 of the roadmap itself. Ultimately, this will be an A2 poster as well, primarily on the 2 pages that are on the screen right now, but also it will have on their context to those peer roadmaps that are under development over the course of this calendar year as well. Now, without reading each pathway and every step to the targets, there's 4 aspects that I just want to draw your attention to over the course of the following 4 slides. Okay, zooming in to the top quarter of the slide, we've summarised what is driving the demand for satellite communications. So that's a key aspect that I was describing before. There needs to be market demand for this stuff, and we've captured that in the 3 drivers that are on your screen. On the next slide, and this is really based on the middle 2 quarters of the roadmap, that is the 6 technologies that we believe Australia has competitive advantage in to meet demand based on those drivers that right up the top quarter. And then on the next slide, we're zooming in right down to the bottom to the facilitators that really underpin the successful steps that we need to get from today to tomorrow, achieving the targets. Which brings me to the last quarter, the last element that I want to describe, and that's on the far right-hand side of the roadmap. And that's where we've got targets per technology, but also we've got our overarching ambition right on the right-hand side of the screen. So that's just an overview of the mechanics of the roadmap. I didn't want to take it through with you step by step. But one thing I did want to take you through step by step is just the objective and outcomes for all of these 6 technologies that were considered. And just starting off with low Earth orbit satellite services, our objective there is to really enable the monitoring control of terrestrial and orbital infrastructure in smarter ways. We've seen pedigree in this already come out from Australia, and we are really on a trajectory to become a global leader in the application and sustainable in manufacturing of space and Earth-based Internet of Things technologies. And it's very much niche opportunities in that where we can excel. In terms of outcomes, there's the increasing demand for connectivity between devices and near Earth industries such as agriculture and resources that aren't necessarily serviced by those terrestrial networks. Just stepping forward to our second focus technology now, we're looking at optical ground stations. So there's no secret, we've got a great big backyard and we're pretty good for cloud cover. But the thing is, we need to emerge as an internationally trusted partner and a destination of choice for secure, high bandwidth optical communications and a range of optical global services. And then in a subsequent segment, you'll see the relationship that this high capacity opportunity in optical may have from significant ground stations, also that transferring over to more mobile and transportable optical hybrid terminals as well. And the outcome is that we want to match those high data rate expectations, but also the security that optical communications can offer for robust networks for dual use for civil and military applications. And this also has relationships with quantum technologies as well, because that will also demand higher capacity networks. When we're stepping into our third technology that we're focused on, I briefly mentioned those hybrid RF terminals. And what our objective here is to emerge as a trusted partner for the provision of those services and the products. There is absolute opportunity there in bridging that gap between the limitations that we have RF and future optical capability, but also having that ability to revert back and use RF if you are unable to use optical on account of terrestrial or space weather. The outcome is very much high capacity and resilient communications for dual and civil military use. Okay, I think it's time to hit our fourth focus segment for communications. This one here is reconfigurable networks, radios, modems, and waveforms. Our objective here, once again, is to emerge as a trusted partner in contributing to cognitive radio global supply chains, hosting ground segment for international space missions, and forming an integral part of the evolving next generation of communications, spanning from the integration of optical and RF technologies. So there I'm describing diversity in frequency from optical to RF, but there is absolute opportunity with network management systems that can handle a range of different frequencies all the way up to optical, and handling orbits or multiple orbits as well. We do not see this as a linear path. In terms of an outcome, we want to leverage our experience in optical and RF communications, but the thing is, there are also lessons that we can learn from radar that have extensibility into communications as well, to develop not only highly capable network management systems, but also a workforce that has pedigree in this and generally understands how to use spectrum as a finite resource. And also foster an environment where we're leading the development of cognitive radios, but also antenna manufacturing as well. Stepping into our fifth technology. And there is some overlap here with the previous technology as well. This is when we really are focusing on those network management tools. This really is our opportunity here. Really is amplified by advances in satellite operations tools. It is so complex in the spectrum environment and the network environment, and when you superimpose over the top of that cyber security, there is an absolute opportunity here. And we see this really stemming from software-enabled network management tools, and also underpinned by artificial intelligence to support the operators, because it is becoming very complex out there in that network and cyber environment that we can't see. So there are high degrees of automation opportunities that we see in there as well. In terms of an outcome, it's enabling peer communication segments with the conditions that set Australia up for success if we're competing in higher capacity and high information assured satellite communications, once again, for dual civil military applications. So these network management tools, they really do underpin the other segments of a SATCOM system. If we're not kicking goals in our network management tools, the other technologies will suffer. Okay, jumping to the last one. Quantum-enabled technologies is definitely not the sixth segment because we view it as a lower priority. They are not structured by priorities at all. The thing is, for Australia to capitalise on quantum-enabled communications, we have to be very confident and effective in our introduction into service of those previous technologies that I mentioned. And they really do underpin the opportunities that we can capitalise on domestically and internationally with quantum-enabled communications. And our objective there is to establish Australia as a respected contributor to global quantum communications. There's a growing community out there, and Australia is already a part of it and contributing to those supply chains. And the technologies that we want to focus on are very much in quantum memory, quantum receivers, and quantum key distributions. And our state-of-the-art analysis indicated that for those three themes under quantum-enabled communications, Australia has absolute pedigree in them, and in one of them, I would argue, world-leading. In terms of an outcome, we need quantum technologies to meet increasing demands for capacity, but the big point here is information assurance of that information that we're actually passing around. And we need to leverage off the opportunities that quantum memory, quantum receivers, and QKD can indeed provide. So that's our sixth and final technology, and it's quantum technologies, not just for communications, but other related areas. I think it's very much a technology that we need to keep an eye on. I can see quantum really going somewhere. When we're setting the conditions for the 2030s, there's just a couple of trends that I really want to highlight. When we look back, you can see what the historical trends are, particularly over the recent decades, on our dependence on information. Now, this is absolutely expected to grow into the 2030s based on drivers that we've previously described. Now, if we have targeted investments into those four space pillars of inspire, national, international, and responsible use of space, that really does set the conditions for Australia to realise significant social and economic benefits, not just from satellite communications, but also how those skills and benefits can overflow into those Tier 6 technology roadmaps that are under development. The thing is, in order for us to compete globally, we need to continue our trajectory of developing a growing and a highly skilled STEM workforce if we are to achieve our goal of an Australian space sector valued at about $12 billion and sustaining approximately 30,000 jobs. So that's where we see ourselves heading in the future. Now, to get to this point in the maturation of the first of 7 roadmaps, on behalf of the Chief Technology Officer at the Australian Space Agency and her staff, I would like to extend a sincere thanks to a range of staff from multiple government departments and also the 10 universities that helped draft the initial versions of this roadmap. But the thing is, this roadmap was further refined with inputs from the states and territories and over 24 companies represented by a range of industry consortiums that you can see on your screen now. It's very simple. Without their help and their absolute diversity of thought, we simply wouldn't have been able to deliver on phase 2 of that civil space strategy of getting the first of those 7 roadmaps out there. It's probably a good time now where I hand over to Arvind, and Arvind can take you through the next step in the implementation of the Comms Services and Technologies roadmap.
Thanks, Mick. We have taken a highly collaborative approach in this roadmap process, and it has been a highly productive journey so far. So we are keen to utilize the roadmap as a catalyst for the implementation phase, and we look forward to working together with Team Australia on the implementation. We will continue our tag meetings, and we'll also continue our stakeholder meetings to make sure that we keep the roadmap updated and also collaboratively identify opportunities for funding, for programs, and for missions to realize the true potential of this roadmap. So along the journey, keep us posted on how your projects are going and keep us posted on your successes, however small or big they may be. And more importantly, keep us posted on the roadblocks that you're facing so that we can navigate them together. So it will be an exciting journey, and we're looking forward towards the implementation phase. Thank you. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you everyone for coming today. We hope that you have enjoyed the webinar, and we do look forward to working with you to grow the Australian space industry. On the previous slide, we do have a layout of the roadmaps that we are looking to release as the year progresses, so do watch out for those. We're very excited today to have one cab off the rank, but with the others that are coming. So further information is available with the next slide at the at space.gov.au, which is the agency website, and the inquiries email address should come up that you can put your answers there as well. One other tidbit that I saw is someone asked for us to repeat the defence email address. So Mick, do you mind just reading that one out for that person?
Yeah, and I just saw that one. I'm just typing it in now. It is jnt.9102@defence.gov.au. And I've just put that in the chat right now.
Thank you, Mick. So just a reminder that a recording of the presentation will be available on the agency YouTube and our social media pages. Thank you everybody for your time today.